Captain Picard's Aunt Adele cured a lot of sleepless nights with his steamed milk. The Stellar Dynamics Lab decided they need to install new modules, and Worf is experiencing Nibpo. Hello, everybody, and welcome to The Seventh Rule with Sirach Lofton.
Hello.
My name is Ryan T. Husk, and today we are doing a review of Star Trek The Next Generation, Season 5, Episode 18, Cause and Effect. We're doing a review of Star Trek The Next Generation, Season 5, Episode 18, Cause and Effect. We're doing a review of Star Trek... Okay.
All right.
Written by Brandon Braga, directed by Jonathan Frakes. More on that in a moment. This was March 21st, 1992. Where were you? And how are you today, Sirach?
I'm great. I'm doing great. This was March what? March 30. I can't hear you.
March 21st, 1992.
21st.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I like to write the dates down.
Me too.
All right. Okay, good. I'm doing great.
Awesome.
Doing great.
So I have some, by the way, this is Frasier here.
Not Frasier Crane.
I have some, he's also Beast in the X-Men movies. I have some pretty strong, edgy opinions on this episode because I have seen it before. But I would like to know, Sirach Lofton, this is your first time watching this episode. What did you think?
Overall, I thought it was entertaining. I thought it was kind of, compelling. Obviously, I wanted to figure out how they were going to solve the riddle. It started off with the shortest open I think I've seen so far on Next Generation, which was about, I don't know if that open was about 30 seconds. It just played out the last clip. There's 36 seconds left. What about this? Let's do this. Okay, use the tractor beam, and then explosion. And that was the end of the opening credits. And then, so you're like, oh, wow, this is, obviously we're going to cut, when we cut back in, we're cutting back into the moment before that. Right. So, I thought it set up a nice little time loop scenario. Very interesting for me. I did like, for example, when I was a kid growing up, there was a movie for all of you that are not old enough to know, but it was called Groundhog Day and was starring Bill Murray.
Oh, man, one of the best scripts ever written. Yes. So well produced, directed, acted. Bill Murray. I mean, that's one of the best movies of all time, that one.
One of the best movies of all time.
Yeah.
If you just want to have a good laugh and just be stuck in this story, Groundhog Day, I thought, by Bill Murray, was one of my favorite movies growing up as a kid. I thought he was phenomenal in that movie. And this episode has elements of that I think, were curious for me to see what the Star Trek spin was going to be on that subject.
Totally. Groundhog Day, I believe, written and directed by Harold Ramis, who was Egon in Ghostbusters and also wrote and directed Ghostbusters. Maybe co-written, but I think that's right. Okay. So
good knowledge.
Thank you. I think. But Ghostbusters, I think, is the most quotable movie of all time. Ghostbusters and Friday. Those two, if I don't quote Ghostbusters and Friday, then I only say like half the things I'm going to say.
What's the number one Ghostbusters quote you think out there?
I think probably people say, "She slimed me." That's a movie that's a quote people say a lot, or so she's a dog, or I don't know. There's just, you can go on forever. Honestly, that's a big Twinkie by Winston Zeddemore. As long as there's a steady paycheck in it, I'll believe in anything you say. That's also a good one.
Okay, and obviously Friday is man. It's Friday. You ain't got a job.
That's the one, and you ain't got shit to do.
You ain't got shit to do.
How you gonna get fired on your day off?
On your day off, yeah. So
there's some Miss Parker lines that we can't repeat, but anyway.
So yes, Ghostbusters, Friday, rewind back to Groundhog Day, and again back one more step to cause and
There we
effect.
are. We're right back here. Here we go. So here's what I'd like to say about cause and effect, this movie or this episode. This is one of my favorite episodes of Star Trek of all time. Very likely top 10, maybe top 5. And it's back in the day, before Netflix, the way I would watch Star Trek is I would go into the local like comic shop at a mall or something, and I would see their selection of VHS tapes, and you'd have to buy an episode for 19.99. One episode, 19.99. I bought maybe 20 or 40 of them over the years, and this was definitely one of them. And I'm telling you, another thing that's great about this episode is anytime I want to introduce someone to Star Trek, this is the episode I use, because you get it right away. And like you like to say, it could be a Twilight Zone episode. And so anytime I've ever introduced Star Trek to somebody that's never seen it, I play this episode. They love it. They get it. It makes sense. And they want more.
Yeah, I mean, I can see that, and there were elements of this episode that were really good. I thought Jonathan Frakes, I didn't catch who directed it, director title
Same here.
before and while I was watching it, so I didn't know who directed it until you just said it. And um, from my observation, I thought there was some really good choices made in the directing style.
So
The
good.
pull in close ups to Beverly Crusher when she was having those weird moments, like, hey, this doesn't feel right. Those close ups were great. Um, Filming her cutting the plant in different angles, one from this side of the room, one from the other side. It just gave enough of a variation of a repeat script, right? Because we're going to hear the same lines almost.
Yeah.
And and because he used different angles each time, it made it feel different a little bit, which is good visually. There were moments, for example, even in the final scene where they explode, the way he covered it, Jonathan Frakes covered it. He did different angles, different shots each time. One time from the back looking at the screen, one time as a close up on Data's face while it was happening, and so just really clever. And the delivery was slightly different by the actors, if you noticed that as well. During the scenes of repeating, at first I was like, are they just going to reuse the same shots over and over again?
like one of those clip shows.
Yeah, is this going to be a clip show? Did this episode only take 2 days to film, but they made it look like it took 7, Um, but no, they didn't. They weren't lazy about that, right? First of all, Brandon Braga, credit to him. Rarely we see a script that doesn't have anybody else's name on it.
Totally.
So, Brandon Braga wrote this script. He did no teleplay, no story by credits. It's written by one name. That's it. And so I that stood out to me as well. Like, oh, Brandon Braga, must be the kind of moment for him when I feel like maybe, he really kind of got his recognition as, oh, this guy's really good at what he does. I don't know. I don't know that he had a script before this that was as good as this one is, and written solely by him. But this seems like to me a full display of how good a writer he is.
Totally agree. So I didn't pay attention to who wrote and or directed this. Maybe I knew, maybe I'd forgotten. I just kind of dove into it. I've probably seen it 20 times. And when it was towards the end, it was maybe like 2/3 of the way through the episode, I was like, I have got to know who directed this. I've got to know this, because I kept being impressed. Like I told myself, all right, Ryan, just enjoy this episode, because I hadn't seen it in a long time, but you're going to always notice something new every time. And this time what I noticed by far was the directing. I was like, oh my God, these shots and these choices the director's making, and when to do the close up, and just all of these things. There was one close up on Riker. I don't remember exactly where I put it in my notes,
It was fantastic.
where suddenly it's just like his right on his face, and he says something like, "You're going to call my bluff," or something,
Yeah, yeah.
whatever it was, and it's just like this beautiful like close up right at the right time.
With the right facial expressions to match it as an
Yeah.
actor. So he's on both sides of that camera
Mm-hmm.
doing exceptional work.
And then I finally looked. I was like, okay, let me just pause this, check on IMDb, and I was like, oh my God, it's Jonathan Frakes. This is what a brilliant director, especially considering that he was still pretty new to it at that time. Just
Yeah.
A+ directing, I thought, on his part.
And yeah, to add to that, like I said, I like the bedroom scenes shots with Dr. Crusher. Felt like he was exploring that bedroom each way, each time in a
Mm-hmm.
different way. So it was like, we saw a table that wasn't featured before when she walked over to move the glass to a different table. He covered the plant on different sides of the plant so that it didn't look like we were seeing the same shot over again. And the shot also in Picard's quarters when he's reading the book and kind of has a revelation like, am I reading the same thing again? That shot from far
Yeah.
away, I like the fact that he didn't do close ups. He kind of did a real wide, far away shot, and it looked beautiful. I mean, it looked just exotic enough where it's like a weird kind of dream episode. You know what I mean? Just a tinge of that, but not over the top where it's like, oh, this is clearly a flashback or dream sequence. So I liked the choices he made in this.
Yeah, and I thought that he did set up those slightly off shots or off-putting camera movements, not super disconcerting, but just enough to where it feels a little weird, because that's putting us in the mood of the characters. The characters are feeling like something is slightly off, but they're not really sure. Maybe they didn't have a good night's sleep. Beverly heard voices. Picard's like, I feel like I read this thing before. There's just there's a little fuzziness, a slight uneasiness. And I thought that his directing choices really showed that, and it put us in that mood. I mean, it was just so good. And to Brandon Braga's credit, totally agree. It's amazing he was able to do that with no credited feedback. I'm sure there was some kind of feedback and whatever, but like the scene where Picard is flipping through the pages, a good writer knows he does. You don't have to have any dialogue. He doesn't have to say anything. He's already mentioned earlier in the script, come to think of it, I felt like I had read some of those paragraphs before. And then 15 minutes later, we see a scene where he's kind of flipping through and we know exactly what he's doing. He's going, wait, what the heck? It's so good. Everything pays off. I just thought the writing and directing were fantastic.
Again, and let me give another payoff and tip of the hat to Brandon Braga when he takes us for a twist in the third act of this. And that is when we expect to see the A7-6 queen,
Yes.
pair of queens.
Yeah.
As the audience, he's already taken us along. So we're like, oh, I know what's going to happen here.
Yeah, now we can
Data's
predict the
do,
cards.
Yeah, right. Right. And so now we're just waiting for a variation on that. Who's going to react to it? And he takes us for a loop when he's like, three queens, three tens, and you're looking at the hand and you're like, everybody has three of a kind, um, you know, and it doesn't make sense now. All of a sudden, you don't figure it out. Like you're like, wait a second, I thought I had this figured out. I thought we were going to go into the next loop cycle,
Yeah.
and everybody was going to be that farther ahead in the loop cycle so that they would be able to break the chain. Instead, here we are. We like get this whole different the math is different. Everybody's like, what the hell? We don't even know what's going on. There's a lot of threes all of a sudden, threes everywhere, threes, and we're like, I'm like, what do threes have to do with it? So we're as the audience trying to figure out threes. What are the threes for? You know what I mean? And just such a great that kind of moment brought me back to the Usual Suspects, because it had a little bit. One of my favorite things, Usual Suspects, is the scene where he's like, you realize that Sosa is a figment of his imagination that he's pulling from all of the things on the wall, and that same moment of realization felt like was happening with Data when he was having the realization what the threes all meant, right? It was like threes, 2,400 different threes, all these threes, like, and it's only something that he would figure out, right? As a whatever
And then he
however he
realizes
perceives
that he must have been the one subconsciously, inadvertently doing it. Like, and it's so funny when he says, I assure you the card is sufficiently randomized, but come to find out later on that like he is actually, without even realizing it, he's counting cards, he knows where everything is, and he's putting things. It's amazing.
Yes. So that was like the Sosa moment in Usual Suspects for me, where Data has constructed this whole thing, while we're trying to figure it out. Like, how did he come up with it?
Mm-hmm. So I remembered what this one close-up was that I really liked was in the poker game. He said Beverly's kind of acting weird. This is maybe middle of the episode. She's kind of acting weird. And she's like, oh, they say, what's wrong? She says, oh, nothing, but we know what's going on. And then Riker says, like, okay, I'll see your 20 and I'll raise you. And then right when he says 50, it's like, boom, close up, he goes 50. And he just kind of stares and like realizes, he's like, you're going to call my bluff, aren't you? And it's just so good because it's like 50, like, because right when that close up hits, it shows he's having the realization at the same time as we're having the realization that it's just it's like a bam, it's like a big, powerful, hit you over the head kind of delivery. And it was so smart. Thought that was great. Another one, again, in the poker room. I don't know if it was that time they did poker or the next cycle, but there was a moment where the camera is just kind of panning behind Riker's head, kind of looking at everybody, but kind of slowly and weirdly and almost a little off kilter, just great stuff.
Yeah. Great stuff. Even Worf, I'm experiencing nib paw. And it's funny that the Klingons have a name for the same thing that we have a name for, right?
Mm-hmm.
A deja vu, right? And that's a French thing?
Yeah, it means already seen or already saw.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Deja vu, French word meaning already see or already saw.
Yeah, well, it's two words. Déjà means already, and vu, it's actually vu, if you can say that. Okay. Which means, seen.
Okay. And, this brings up an interesting topic about this exact subject that I kind of want to extend further into. Maybe we can do another side. I don't know how much time we got, but it's a pretty interesting subject.
Let's hear it.
And that is about deja vu itself. And, because I had recently had this conversation with my friend about what he thought deja vu was. So what we've all kind of experienced it to some degree, right? Where you're just in this moment and feel like you've been at this place before.
Totally.
And you're like, I've never been here before, but I feel like I've been here before. Not
or
only
someone's
that,
you're watching TV and your friend is saying something. You're like, I've experienced this moment before.
Yes. And so what is your philosophy or guess or, hypothesis about what that could possibly be?
I don't know. And I've had, I don't know what's normal for deja vu, but I've had it plenty of times. And each time it's almost like a dream where it's like, you think the dream's a lot cooler than it is. Like if you ever try to tell somebody a dream, they're like, oh, okay, that's cool. Anyway, pass the salt, right? But you're like, no, it was really, same thing with deja vu. You're like, whoa, man. To you, it's like a spiritual awakening. You're like, dude, wait, stop. I think I think I just had deja vu. And they're like, okay, I don't care. Change the channel. Like, to them, it's like, nobody
Yeah.
gives a shit. But it's really funny because to us, it's like this spiritual moment.
Yes.
I will say one thing that has happened to me too that's weird is I've dreamt of places that I've never been before, and then a few years later see that place for the first time. And I'd never been there. I didn't know where it was. I'm just going by and I'm like, this fence. I saw this fence in a dream 7 years ago. Like that's
Yeah.
so that's kind of similar. But anyway, what's your
Yeah.
theory on deja vu?
Well, first of all, just to acknowledge what you said about the kind of feeling that you get as an individual experiencing it, but it doesn't exactly, translate to everybody
No.
else being that enthusiastic about it, right? Which is actually something they point out in this episode, is relevant to Dr. Crusher saying both of us, like both of us having deja vu at the
Yeah, that
exact
doesn't
same time,
happen.
right? So it would be weird if you were to say, yo, I'm feeling this moment, this is deja vu. And somebody else, while you say that, say, yes, yes, I am too. And I've never met you before. And it's weird. Like, are you like, then the two of you are sharing in the common experience as opposed to being just an inside out looking out at the world kind of perspective. So that's the first thing said. But the thing that I think is interesting to me as a philosophy, and this is just speculation because I don't have an answer really. I don't know the answer. I don't think anybody does. But I think there are hypotheses that you can possibly make. And one of those is that to some degree or another, you are experiencing something for the set again,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so then if you are experiencing something again, if that is the truth behind it, then that means there is some kind of playback that's happening at some point in the what we perceive as reality is perhaps a playback of a reality that has already transpired, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we
It's a
only
glitch in the matrix.
yeah, and we only recognize it in those moments when we're like when we perceive it as the viewer of the playback from externally, like, well, this is weird. I've seen this again. I've seen this before. So you'd have to step outside of your consciousness kind of to have seen it before, or it's tied to a memory. So in that way, I think we're recording devices, human beings, right?
Oh, interesting.
I think human beings are recording devices that record a lifetime worth of experience in through their senses, and that goes onto a hard drive somewhere in your brain, and perhaps that hard drive system is not necessarily deleted. So it could technically remain in some perpetuity state so that as it plays back like we experience, we just keep reliving life over again in this replay back cycle of whatever we've experienced on our hard drive. I don't know.
Yeah, it's nuts because it's not like with deja vu, it's not like we're experiencing something similar where we're like, whoa, dude, I remember sitting here with you and having this conversation about ice cream. It's like you are saying the exact words. I remember this exact sentence coming out of your mouth. It's a
Yes.
duplicate. Whereas,
Yes.
like in the case of this episode, there would be sometimes it would be the exact same line. Sometimes there's a variation of the line because from when they started, everything could kind of play out a little bit differently based on, Beverly
Hmm.
reacting to whatever. So that's what's crazy about deja vu is that it's exactly the same thing. And yeah, bringing it back to this episode, I did love exactly that. How Ro Laren's line was identical, but Beverly Crusher and Jordy's lines were different every time because they were affected by the things preceding it in that day. She had one memory or heard of some voices, and that kind of changes the way things progress. And it was really smart to decide which lines stay the same, which ones change slightly, which are just, some of them are just completely different scenes, and some of them are the exact same line but delivered differently because now they're unsure. All that was just perfect.
I agree. I like the progression of it. You know, the curiosity. I thought that Dr. Crusher, Gates McFadden, did a fantastic job
Mm-hmm.
of playing the curiosity and playing the moment so well. She was really the perfect vehicle for this story, I thought, because she had the sensitivity, she had the connection with the captain, you know, to be able to reach out to him on a personal level, and because she's a doctor and analyzes things through her medical background and her scientific analysis of things, he would trust her observations in a way that might be dismissed if it was Worf saying it, right?
True.
If Worf's like, Captain, I'm experiencing nip paw, you know, he's like,
Nippo. Keep your
yeah.
hands off my Nippo, buddy.
So it might not have been received the same. I thought she was the perfect person to be able to advance this storyline. I like the way her scenes and interaction with Geordi in the medical room, that also helped advance the storyline because Geordi was able to see resonance of this vibrational echo, you know, of repetition. So that was a great vehicle too. She was able to use the scientific diagnosis of his visor, and that also led to more, you know, discovery on what was going on. So, in general, she was the perfect character to be able to advance this story in the way that it was. I think.
I agree. And we're going to jump into our break. And then I'm going to tell you somebody on the other side of that coin who got jobbed pretty bad.
Okay. All right.
You may
Okay.
guess. We'll be right back on the seventh rule.